Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Dr. Greer. Thank you for being here.
Thank
We have
you.
an exciting afternoon planned. We're going to be speaking about Buga Sphere developments, and then we're going to have Ashton Forbes join us in the next 30 minutes talking about the MH370 flight. And so let's get started.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for supporting our membership and being part of our group. It helps fund a lot of what we're doing in our research. And speaking of which, I think most of you had heard that the Buga Sphere was carbon dated to 12,560 years ago, which of course is almost 3 times older than the Great Pyramid. And that is based on the resin material that are in the equatorial ports around the middle of the equator of the Buga Sphere. And since then, we got the results from a very prestigious lab for the metallurgy, and that's an analysis of it. And the gamma ray emissions were a baseline, indicating that this object had not spent any significant time in outer space. Now, that doesn't tell us where it originated from, since if it had originated on another planet or even been put together out of Earth material by an ET ancient civilization or human advanced civilization connected to the ETs, we don't know which. I think it's probably more extraterrestrial in origin. It wouldn't show that if it had not spent significant time out in space getting gamma ray bombardment, or pass through space. So we'll get into this in a little bit about how you manufacture extraterrestrial materials. What's more interesting is the metallurgical analysis. Now, we always knew it was 90+% aluminum, but what we've gotten now is a whole list of 15 or 20 elements that are in this compound, this alloy. And there's no alloy on the planet that matches this aluminum alloy that the shell of the sphere is made of. There's not a match. There's some that are similar. And what's interesting is that in some of the elements, and I'm not going to bore you with all that, is that some of them are elements which were not even discovered until the late 1800s or early 1900s. And since the Buga Sphere itself is dated to 12,560 years ago, that is remarkable. Those particular rare earth elements are also ones used in very high-tech electronics and precision engineering, but also for electromagnetic and magnetic field modulation. So I think what we're looking at there is the actual physics of how this Buga Sphere would spin and lose its mass and levitate, sort of anti-gravity, is very much connected to this unique alloy that the shell of the Buga Sphere, which is 2 or 3 centimeters thick, it's an inch to an inch and a half thick, and that aluminum alloy not only doesn't match any known existing ones on Earth, but it also has elements in it that weren't even known on Earth until a little over 100 years ago. I also want to point out that the aluminum process, how you make aluminum from bauxite ore, was not even invented until the late 1800s and didn't go into widespread use until the very late 1800s and early 20th century. Before then, aluminum in its state of just pure aluminum was so rare, it would be found where there had been a high temperature like volcano or something that would naturally be hot enough to smelt it out of the ore, was more valuable than gold. Gold was nowhere near as precious as aluminum was prior to the modern era. So that's a very interesting fact as well, because human civilization didn't even have the ability to make something like this, at least the modern industrial human civilization, until the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I think these findings are going to be it's additive, that with the carbon dating of the resin that's in the actual portals around the center. And then another interesting part about this is that the metallurgy would indicate that if there was a compound that was of this precise composition, if it does exist on Earth, it's classified. In other words, it wouldn't be in a database that it matches with. And but when you look at this object and its age, it would indicate more and more that it's of a non-human extraterrestrial origin, and that it was one that was either teleported here, which we can talk about that, and we'll get into this a little more with the discussion with Ashton Forbes about the Malaysian jet that vanished in thin air, but also where the manufacturing of an ET object isn't, you don't dig up ore and smelt it and then weld it together into a Boeing jet or a car. They actually use a type of technology where it sets up a frequency at a very basic level of space-time in the 0 point, and they materialize all those elements. It's sort of like a 3D printing. It all comes out as one. And this is true of all the ET craft that have been analyzed after we've downed them in crash retrievals. And it's also true of parts of craft that have been studied by scientists I know who work under contract with either CIA or some tech company. And I think this would then explain why the sphere itself, when you look at it, and when we were boring into these little ports to get this metal sample, there were aspects of it that were integrated in the metal that looked like communication or perhaps little hair-like fiber optics or something, but they weren't like running along the outside wall or something. They're integrated into the actual skin and the thickness of the aluminum sphere, which is very unusual. And it's not at all how we manufacture things. If you take apart any solid state device you have, it's a zillion little parts welded and put together. This is not how ET manufacturing happens. So I think all of this would indicate that we're dealing with a bona fide non-human extraterrestrial device. And then on top of it, you have this breakthrough that's just happened where two separate teams of linguistic experts have analyzed the symbols and found that they were of a Proto-Sanskrit foundation or origin. And those words and symbols have been translated. And it's sort of ominous because it sort of seems to indicate at the time that was made of some catastrophic event that happened from the sun or some cosmic event. And we know that was at the time of the ending of the last ice age, and there were a lot of so-called earth changes and geophysical changes. The question is, why are now all of these? We have 5 videos of 5 separate Buga Sphere activations now that we have received from Jaime Maussan out of Mexico City, because he's in touch with everyone in Colombia, South America, where these objects are happening, in and around the vicinity of Buga, B-U-G-A, Colombia, which is how it got the name Buga Sphere. And that would indicate that there's some kind of Buga Sphere activations, plural, because there are multiple of them, that would, it could be portending that we're coming up on a time of significant geophysical changes or something. So it's a bit interesting, to say the least. So I think that's more to follow. I think what we're going to do at some point, they also found that when people went into a room and chanted mantras, which interestingly originate from Sanskrit, and the symbols on there are Proto-Sanskrit, the sphere starts putting out electromagnetic fields of energy anomalously. I wonder if I had a dream last night, actually, and if we went in and did a puja, which is all in Sanskrit, a whole long puja, and meditated to see what this sphere would do, if it would start interacting in any way. Now, a lot of people who are new haven't followed this, but since the early 90s, I've told people that the Sanskrit language is the root of all Indo-European languages. Proto-Sanskrit would be just a very ancient version of modern, what we have today as Sanskrit, but that the Sanskrit language, the words and the vibrations of those sounds are known as name and form. In other words, the word for water, akshmaniyam, you can use it and materialize water or the same thing for fruit, or same thing. And you hear of the enlightened and masters being able to materialize objects with this kind of frequency and consciousness. Now, it's interesting that this sphere has Proto-Sanskrit on it, seems to be reacting to mantras. And of course, one of the foundational aspects of CE5 contact, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind contact, is the meditative state using those frequencies in the mantras. And, and this was something that I experienced when I was 18, where it was very clear to me that the science of consciousness and the whole Vedic knowledge, which, by the way, precedes any organized religion. People associate it with Buddhism and Hinduism, but that's not true. It actually precedes any of those. So I think it's very important for people to begin to connect a couple dots here. And that is the ancient science of knowledge and even these ancient technologies, some of which are referred to a little bit in the Bhagavad Gita, the Vimanas, the UFOs flying around. But it seems to go back way to pre-recorded history. Now connect that dot and the science of consciousness and CE5 contact to the idea that this Buga Sphere is actually an operating anti-gravity and communication device that seems to have not only the Proto-Sanskrit symbols on it, but seems to react to mantras being chanted in that frequency. So this gets into a very interesting analysis. And this is why, we've been working on a film that we're totally at this point scrapping, and we're going to do a whole new film using the new whistleblower testimony, but all this new information from the Buga Sphere. And another breaking news story is that we've received, 6,000 pages so far of documents from a source who has been working with 7 defectors from illegal covert programs dealing with UAPs and UFOs. And some of them are quite explosive in terms of exposing what was going on with some of the aerospace contractors who were gaslighting and deceiving the US government. What the senior CIA guy I've known since the 90s calls the Rat Pack. And that will be a great little sub chapter of this new film, the Rat Pack. And he talks about how they have been deceiving the US government, the media, and the public, and the UFO community for, quote, decades. I'm quoting from an email he sent me some years ago after the whole kerfuffle happened with the Tic Tac and Lou Elizondo and that whole Rat Pack of disinformation operatives. Now we have documents connecting all of them to receiving millions of dollars in research funds through Bigelow Aerospace, and then reporting back falsified conclusions on things like the Tic Tac. And yet at the same time, it has a lot of information on real research that's very interesting. So now it's going to take us a while to go through all that. We're going to have get an AI program to be able to go through this volume of material, because I'd go blind looking through all of them word by word. But it's an extraordinary development. The other thing to realize is that we're going to be receiving more of these documents, apparently, and there may be some new whistleblowers related to it. So we're going to do an entirely new outline of this film and pivot to something that is just to catch up with the amazing breakthroughs of the last month or so. All of this, I'm telling you, has happened in the last 30 days. So this is where you sort of stop the presses and say, okay, now we have something 10 times more explosive to reveal that will be coming out. And we hope we can finish this so it comes out in 2026 sometime. So that's our goal with the new film we're going to be doing. And then just one other thing, we will be doing a Gaia Sphere event in November. Unfortunately, the dates aren't here on my sheet, but it's sometime in November. We're going to do a fundraiser for all this disclosure work on the Friday night before the Gaia Sphere event. So if you want to help us and want to have a small private gathering with me, we're going to have a whole afternoon and evening for major significant funders who want to help fund this, because we're encountering enormous expenses, not only with the film but with the scientific analysis of all of this material, and also the investigators who are liaisoning with us to the senior law enforcement officials in the United States who are now moving very quickly. I will tell you that the most important developments in disclosure you are not going to see on the internet or on the news, or certainly not in a congressional hearing as they are currently configured. It's happening in the sphere of covert investigators on the side of disclosure, working with the most senior law enforcement people in the United States. And that is what's happening and it's happening very quickly. Now, I am liaisoning that information confidentially to certain members of Congress, and they're aware of it and are cooperating. So that's about all I can say about that, just because I have to hold some of this confidential because I've agreed to do so. So that's sort of a quick trip update on all of that. And one of the things I also want to mention is that with these new documents, one of the things that stood out to me was the amount of money that was obtained. You know, I don't know if you guys remember, during COVID, I think it was in 2021, General Herbert, Bob Herbert, he had been sort of right hand to Senator Harry Reid, who was the majority leader of the Senate back in the day. And Herbert had left the Pentagon as a general and was an assistant on the UFO UAP issue for Senator Reid, who was very interested in this. His home state was Nevada. And Senator Reid ended up mentoring Senator Marco Rubio, who, as co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, along with the chairman, Senator Warner, really began to drill down a few years ago on the UAP issue. And I had been asked, of course, to go in and provide information in a SCIF, a secure compartment information facility, of what we had, because they had been investigating it for a couple years and just hit a lead wall. Interestingly, the chief investigator, who would be the equivalent of a 3-star general if he'd stayed in the Pentagon, told me that he went out to the Lockheed Skunk Works and ended up finding a bunch of old antique jets and stuff, and he knew he was being lied to and gaslit. He was smart enough to know he was, and that's when they reached out to us, and then everything changed, frankly. So, of course, there's a new leadership at the Senate Intelligence Committee and a new chair and co-chair, because Mr. Rubio became the Secretary of State, as you know, a few months ago. But at any rate, that's what's going on at that level. And around before that time, however, General Herbert contacted me. He says, look, we gave tens of millions of dollars to Bigelow Aerospace, which was Robert Bigelow, who I'd met in 1993 at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch. He was a billionaire of Las Vegas who had a hotel chain. And then he had gotten intercepted by Colonel John Alexander and a number of other people who were in this disinformation rat pack that had been operational since the 70s and 80s. And Bigelow Aerospace had a contract to do a report on all of this to the U.S. government. And it was, at the initial amount was $22 million. And of course, this came all out in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times some years ago. But what they ended up giving General Herbert and Senator Reid, quote unquote, was not even a snapshot from 40,000 feet. In other words, he said, we didn't get anything of substance. Meanwhile, in these files that we have obtained from internally are all the hot stuff they did find and do have on crash retrievals, on all kinds of tech, on the science, equations and formulae for gravity control, anti-gravity, whatever you want to call it, 0 point, all this. And this is what we've just received. And it's several thousand pages. I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 pages. But what I'm saying here is that there's a lot to go through, to say the least. I'm going to have to redact anything that could be an operating system that could be weaponized, because I have a responsibility to do so. And I have promised the government since Clinton that that's what we would do, since these can be very dangerous technologies if they are weaponized. But the scandal of all this, quite frankly, is that what was given to the people who used Pentagon funding, but was authorized by Congress back in the early 2000s to get to the bottom of this, ended up being whitewashed and watered down. And yet they were doing all this other work, right, under clandestine contracts with the Defense Intelligence Agency and other entities. So we can now prove this through these documents. Now, the question then becomes, how many crimes were committed by taking those sums of money from the government and covering up their findings? Because, and this is exactly what Dr. Kirkpatrick did with Arrow. The Congress passed laws and funded an office to get to the bottom of the UAP UFO issue. And that became an operation which we can now prove, and which has been concluded, by the way, by certain members of Congress and senior U.S. federal law enforcement as having been a cover-up operation. So there you're talking about multiple felonies of defrauding the government, abuse and misuse of government funds, et cetera, and so on. The only question is going to be, do we have enough now to prove all this? Yes. The question is, how much stomach is there to go to prosecution, right? That's where it becomes very political, unfortunately. But all we can do is put the facts together and make our recommendations to the Congress and to the president and to the Department of Justice and the FBI, et cetera. But that is where that is. And I will tell you that this is very explosive information. So this new documentary we're going to do, I think, could probably be spun off into a whole series that'll be dealing with not only this ancient non-human object, the Buga Sphere object, 12,500 years ago flying around, but now we have all this recent history. And you'll look at the timing of it. In 2001, we did the National Press Club event that kicked off the modern disclosure era. This whole period. Now, we had been doing it before then, but it was quiet and it was not that public. It was called Project Starlight, which was a code name that I didn't give it. A man who was friends with the CIA director for Bill Clinton named it. And that's when we had our first gatherings of top secret whistleblowers in 1995, and then in 1997 for members of Congress. And once we realized that neither the president nor Congress were going to get to do anything, we organized the what's now known as the launch of the global disclosure movement in 2001 at the National Press Club with 22 of these witnesses and whistleblowers. But at this point now I've debriefed over 700 or 800 of them, and we have new ones coming in all the time. And there's another whole group of 7 that are very key that have just surfaced, that have dealt specifically with the technologies and the 0-point electrogravitic and things of this sort. So this continues to grow, and we do appreciate everyone's help and support, because we are not receiving money from the government or a corporation. We're doing this all out of our own ability to fund it and raise the funds to do it on a not just U.S. scale, but on a global scale, all over the world, as well as operations that we have in United Kingdom, Canada, and elsewhere. So those of you who can help and come to our event in Boulder in November, I think Raven probably knows the dates.
Yeah, it's November. Our fundraiser is November 7th, and then the @Sphere event is the 8th and 9th on that weekend.
Yeah, so it'd be fun to see everybody there who can make it. And hopefully also the weekend in the 𝗖𝗍 will be fun. We'll be talking a lot about the Buga Sphere and the 𝗖𝗍, which is kind of funny, but why not? So that's sort of a quick update of the last couple weeks that we've been pulling this together. The metallurgy report, we will release at some point. We're trying to get clearance from the lab to put their name onto it as we release it. Normally it's a very high-end lab, but once we have that answer, we'll know if that's going to be redacted or not. But as soon as we have that answer, we'll release the full report. It's 110 pages of metallurgy analysis on the metal components of the Buga Sphere.
Great. Well, we have Mr. Ashton Forbes that has joined us. So
yes.
Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to talk to you, Dr. Greer.
Good to see you. Good work. Yeah, so just to pivot now from what we were talking about to what Mr. Forbes has to share, just in a way of introduction, Ashton sort of has been the lead person looking into the Malaysian 370 flight that vanished, that no traces were found some years ago, and had received some footage of a very unusual series of spheres going around the jet, and there was a big flash of light and it vanished. Now, of course, I don't have any inside information on that, so I wanted Mr. Forbes to come and share this. And if you can, Ashton, if you can just go through it for people who don't know much about this case, you know, the dates, what had happened, how you came about the footage, what witnesses there are that you can nail down, what companies have been involved that you can nail down, and just do a synopsis for our viewers.
Yeah, definitely. And the reason why I'm so excited to talk to you is that a lot of my research has led me back to you, actually. I think that out of all, I've, learned all the lore of the UFO community and the major players, and you by far and away have talked to the legit Black Project engineers that know the science, know the physics, have clearly worked in the programs, have the NDAs, can't speak about it. So that's why I wanted to get your insight and share some information of my own from my own research. So first thing is that the videos were not given to me. The videos have been on the internet since 2014. Like, these are true leaked footage that was thrown on the internet that everybody discredited, didn't even look into, because it just looked so incredible. No one could believe it was real. And we were not familiar with the military systems that were being depicted. We didn't have like the go fast, the gimbal, those FLIR footages back in 2014. That was like 2017, 2018 that those videos were publicly acknowledged. The other one is, I don't know if you can share the video that I've put up here. This is the big one, is that I've identified this one video to be Gorgon stare wide area motion imagery. And there's had multiple confirmations. So
what is that? I've never, people don't know what those words mean.
Yeah, it's classified still to this day, which is why people haven't been speaking up about it. But this is essentially a drone flying above the airplane, an MQ-9 Reaper drone that has pods underneath each wing. And it's taking photos all the time, circling around an area. And what it does is it beams this through a relay satellite, which you can actually see in the bottom left, NROL-22. That's a real relay satellite, USA-184. It relays that information to like PACCOM or whatever the Special Forces Joint Intelligence Network is. And this would have been only primarily accessible in a SCIF somewhere, like some secured facility where they have intelligence analysts who are reviewing it. And it's basically like Google Earth video playback, presumably only in the regions where they have the drones, or there may be other capabilities. This version of it, we believe, is increment 2 based on the frame rate. It looks like the plane's kind of jerky. It's only about 6 frames per second. Nowadays, they apparently have stuff that's much better than this. But that's why it looks like the screen's moving around. That's why the clouds don't look like they move very much. There's parallax correction in these systems. But this is a real, and also the last point is that you see that cursor that closes that window out there at the end. Right. That's a big clue, because it shows that with these whammy systems, they have a big map, and then they can press somewhere on the screen and it pulls up a window. And it's like what's a
whammy? What's a whammy? If you use an acronym, you need
imagery.
So yeah, okay. So just as a rule, since we're talking to the general public, if you use an acronym, define it the first time, and then we can use the acronym.
Yeah. So it has like 3 different names. They also call it WAS, Wide Area Airborne Surveillance, and then whammy, Wide Area Motion Imagery. So it's a computer system that uses photos from the sky and produces that footage. So that's the big one. And then I'll just share the other video. Is there's 2 drones that were recording this from different angles. And the second one's also an MQ-9 Reaper drone. And you can see, you can see the drone right there. It's actually under hard point number 5 is where this camera is situated. My sources tell me that it's a Lightning G4 by Northrop Grumman, which has color FLIR capability. So it's just an overlay they can put over the FLIR footage, essentially, to show this thermal gradient. And this one's so important because you can see that these are plasma. These orbs are actually plasma. So they're really a drone, actually, that's being encased in plasma. Just like we, in our spy planes, we use a plasma sheath to reduce drag for our hypersonic spy planes or supersonic spy planes. The same concept here. The extra bit that we see, these dark lines that come before and after the plasma, this is actually indicative of a field reverse configuration or a plasmoid. You may be familiar with the terminology, where they're essentially using the exhaust, so to speak, from this fusion reactor in the middle of this as propulsion. And then, as you see there, this is the first question I had for you. The plane disappears like in a flash, but as the orbs converge on the plane, and when I started researching this, the first thing that came up was wormholes. And I believe that that is truly a real wormhole, but it's more of how it's being accomplished. That's the amazing part about it. Even this slow-mo version was actually built into the original footage that was first found on the internet, which tells us that whoever leaked this, they wanted us to like understand what these plasma spheres really are, what they're made out of, how they function. You can see this weird heat signature in them, which seems to mean that it's a non-equilibrium plasma, like the electrons have been separated from the ions and they're being kept separated intentionally to build up a charge. And then this last bit here, I'll just go ahead and spoil what I think it is, then I want to get your opinion, is that from my research, I think those are plasma fusion propulsion, that what we're seeing with those plasma orbs. I think Lockheed Martin's definitely implicated in this for sure. They had a compact fusion reactor that went dark. And I think that what we're seeing is a thermonuclear weapon. I think it's literally a thermonuclear weapon in the sense that the plasma orbs are acting as a polyhedral fission trigger, and that on board that plane was a whole bunch of lithium-ion batteries. And it turns out that lithium is one of 3 aneutronic fusion fuels, and it's used in thermonuclear weapons. So I think that, long story short, that we learned how to manipulate space-time when we were building nukes. And then when we turned them into clean nukes, clean fusion bombs, we really started to manipulate space-time in a significant sense. And that's what I think led to that video you just saw.
Right. And so getting back to the provenance of all this, which is all important, because, you know, in the era of deep fakes and computer generated graphics and images and video and motion graphics, people are always going to say, and I've been doing this for 35 years now, if it's a really good photograph, it's CGI. If it's not crystal clear, it doesn't tell you anything. They're always going to come up with an excuse. So what I have found is that you have to nail down the provenance, meaning the history, origin, and credibility of the origin, without which you got bumpkiss. Just a word to the wise. I mean, I've been doing this a very long time.
Yeah, you ready for this? So the leaker of the video.
We got to hear. We got to hear. You know who had this footage? How can we prove that this leaker had access to it, and his provenance, and also a few jurisdictional questions? Where exactly was this event when it vanished? Let's just say it did happen as shown. Geographically, where precisely did it happen? The person who leaked it, what was his nationality and corporate affiliation? Things like that are going to be very important for what we're doing.
So, and I'll share just one more image right away, because the location is super important, because that's actually Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. It's not meant to look like MH370. It just literally is. If you pull up this kind of, I built this into Google Earth here. This is the real path of MH370, starting from Kuala Lumpur when it went dark over the South China Sea. And then later on, we found out it turned around and went back towards Penang Airport, which is a place that you would land. And then it makes another deviation. This was still tracked by military radar when it starts going northwest here. And then you see the military radar lost at 1822 UTC. Just because this is flat, it's not a straight line, but this would basically be a straight line going to the northwest up here to where you see it says satellite video coordinates. These are the real coordinates in that whammy footage that I was just showing you. And this is 20 minutes away from the last radar plot that was publicly known by the Malaysian government. Now, also note there's a witness, Catherine T, this woman here. I've spoken to Catherine T. She's a real person that really saw the plane on fire, glowing orange, right in the path of where this plane is being shown in those videos. So the providence, or at least the evidence that shows that this is legitimate, includes a real person who saw the plane and a report in China Times that was not reported in Western media that claimed to be an intercepted communication of the pilot saying that the plane was attempting an emergency landing and disintegrating, which is corroborated by the witnesses citing in both those videos I just showed you. Now, the real thing that people want to know when it comes to the Providence is
So
okay.
here's a question. Wait, let's stop. So the plane was on fire before these plasmoids appeared and it vanished.
Correct.
So
And so
in other words, timelines are very important. Which came first?
yeah, let me pull that back up. So the plane starts on fire, I presume, if I pull that back up here, at the top right, where it says plane goes dark, 1722 UTC. Why does the plane go dark and why does the plane turn around? A lot of people had speculated fire, actually, actually the lithium-ion batteries as well, but they weren't known for over a week after the plane disappeared, and I think that was covered up. Personally, I think the whole thing was an operation. I think they planted those batteries on the plane dual purpose. One, to start the diversion, to force the plane to turn around. And then at some point, why doesn't it land at Penang? That's where I think the United States military comes over the comms and says, come to the rendezvous point, which is those coordinates that I just showed you. And they probably said something like, try to land in the water and we'll fish you out of the water. And instead they deployed those orbs on the plane, which was all part of the operation, presumably, or maybe there was backup plans and, you know, something didn't go according to plan. But that's my question for the U.S. government. What I can tell you for sure, so this plane would have been on fire, but not like an uncontrollable fire, like a controlled fire by batteries that were intended to start on fire, that were intended not to take down the plane. They were also had a dual purpose, potentially as a neutronic thermonuclear weapon. They could have been the payload for that. So this is the reason why we would have never found the plane. This is why the whole south. The other point is that location I showed you where the plane is at the same location where they claim the plane takes a sharp south turn into the South Indian Ocean, flies for like 5 hours and supposedly crashes. Only problem, we never found anything down there. And then we find this debris that shows up. It shows up, we would expect it to show up in the coast of Australia because that's where the plane crashed off the coast of Australia. The ocean currents go to the east. But instead we find all the debris, which is only about 10 pieces, 15 pieces at most. I do think it's from MH370. We find it in Africa, a completely different continent. And actually, in order for this to begin to make sense, we need the plane to either go in the water or have a final destination much closer to Africa than where we've been searching in the South Indian Ocean near Australia. So the circumstantial evidence seems to show that something at least is not right about the story because we never found the plane. Plane has 4 emergency transponders that only go off during a crash. Somehow they can't be deactivated. Somehow none of them go off in this situation. The whole thing to me reeks of espionage, and this is why I've come to you, is because these videos, the reason why they don't want them out are multiple purposes. One, that Gorgon stare capability is integrated into all of our intelligence, and that's why you can't talk about it at all. It's not just that we have a drone flying over there. It's integrated into a big network that an AI is looking around, mapping the whole planet, looking for differences all the time.
Right.
Like we have much more capabilities than we want, so they can never talk about that. The other thing is there's no way to spin this to claim that the aliens were doing it. The reason is because you've got an MQ-9 Reaper drone tracking this plane at super close distance. You can tell it's an operation just based on the proximity of the drone to the airplane. And the camera operator zooms out like this is not their first rodeo. Like they're like, oh, we're going to get this thing perfectly centered to make sure we catch the zap here. And they kind of struggle. The plane falls out of view. You can tell it's somebody manually recording it. Now, the last bit I'll tell you is this, is that now that I'm on my run here, if you can get the government to release the MH370 files, because I promise you they have them, I've been FOIA and everything, and I'm just getting rejected left and right, then all of disclosure will come apart at the seams. And I don't know what it leads back to, if it leads back to aliens or if it leads back to ancient civilization, but I guarantee you this will all fall apart because I found the guy that leaked the videos. His name's Lieutenant Commander Edward Lynn. And after I started exposing...
Now, is he an American? Wait, is he American?
Yes, he is an American. He's a naturalized American from Taiwan, became a naturalized American. He, from talking to people that used to work in his unit, which was the VPU-2 Wizards, a very secretive Navy unit, they said that he was basically the golden boy, that he was being kind of pushed up for upper management. He had been a congressional liaison. He had access to nuclear secrets. And his case is one of the weirdest cases out there. I mean, I noticed once I saw his case, I knew he was the guy because the timeline matched perfectly. He started being investigated right after the plane disappeared. I knew from that footage that it was probably they were going to find out who leaked that for sure because it's not somebody with like a camera phone recording that. That was like somebody pulled that off a flash drive off a skiff and
so what was he charged with?
He was charged with espionage. They were going to put him away forever. It was the first incident of espionage by an active duty member of the Navy since the Cold War. So almost 40, 50 years.
And where is he being held?
Chesapeake is where I think they had him, but
And
the thing
where was the trial? Where was the trial? Norfolk?
I'm not sure. I do know that he got abused during his pretrial detainment, and they wouldn't let him out of pretrial detainment because they were afraid of what he would say to the media. And they convinced him to take a plea deal. And it turns out there was no evidence of him actually sharing any information with anyone from China. They had to admit this later on after coming after him for espionage. And his family was in support, saying there was some kind of misunderstanding related to this. I think that he leaked those videos out of like not knowing what he was looking at and didn't realize how much damage he was doing to national security. And then they get him in a room where they're interrogating him, trying to figure out, who are his connections, why did he leak that footage? And they find out it was kind of
or he may wait. I mean, if he saw that an event happened like that resulted in the death of everyone on that plane, his mistake was not claiming whistleblower status and doing it. So, but that can be corrected. So the question is, I'm getting very specific here.
Please.
This is my wheelhouse. Number one, there's no FOIA officer on the planet that would be able to have access to those files. This is the mistake all UFO people make and UA people make. It's a parallel universe. There's a secret government programs that are corporate, super secret government hybrid entity that's above the president. It's above the Congress. It's above members of the senior folks at the Pentagon I briefed. I mean, even guys who have rotated through as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency have been blocked from this information. So the idea that some bureaucrat desk jockey who looks at FOIA requests is going to have that, even if he wanted to release it, in a million years, he would never have access. So you can save your ink. Number two, the fact is this particular gentleman, this lieutenant colonel or lieutenant, what did you say? He was a lieutenant
commander, Edward
Commander.
Lynn. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they go back to lieutenant commander. Yep.
Lynn, he is. Did he actually ever state that he released that footage or no?
No, and he hasn't, and he had never.
So how do we know? So how do we know he? How do we know he released it?
So, I mean, depends on your level of evidence and proof that you want, but he changed his name legally 2 months after I started outing him on social media, changed his name to Edward 𝗖𝗍. The only way we found him actually was that we found him under his new name doing a promo video for his company, which I'm not trying to ruin his life. I know he's the guy that leaked the videos. I just want him to respond. But he's showing his old photos from the Navy. And the weirdest part was this guy had been charged with espionage. What he leaked went to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's how serious it was. His lawyer said that the evidence in question was available on the internet. His lawyer said that publicly. It's recorded document. And his lawyer said that he was investigated. Investigation began April 2nd, 2014. This is less than a month after the plane disappeared. And that the footage that was available on the internet said received March 12th, 2014. That's 4 days after the plane disappeared. So the person that uploaded it, if they're telling the truth, they got leaked right away. Somebody saw it right away. They panicked. They released it. Edward Lynn changed his name. I had been trying to contact him, couldn't get in touch with him. Finally, someone found his lawyer, Larry D. Youngner, and they actually had a conversation with him where he said something about the feds bringing satellite video into the case. Now, this is secondhand, so I can't corroborate that. I reached out to Larry Youngner half a dozen times, maybe more. Wouldn't pick up the phone, never returned a phone call, eventually turned off his phone entirely, and it's been off ever since. I found Edward Lynn's recent phone number. Somebody else was able to get a connection with it. Actually was on a live stream, called him on the live stream where you can hear his voice on the voicemail. And what I told him was that I don't even necessarily want him to come out as a whistleblower. I think that, to counter your point, I think that what they're doing is technically legal. I mean, yes, I would say if the public were to know about it, we would all say it's absolutely illegal. I mean, there was 239 people on that plane. But I think it's being covered under the PEDS and under nuclear weapons classifications, where normally we would say that that's, these are illegal covert operations. But I think they had a legal reason. I think Avril Haines was actually like the CIA deputy director at the time and became DNI. She was the one who was doing the legal justifications for Obama to do drone strikes. She would have been the one probably writing the legal justification for this operation as well. And so this is why Edward Lynn doesn't take whistleblower status, because it's technically legal stuff that he's doing. And now he's in their good graces. I mean, he's doing videos where he's talking about promoting stuff for the VA and for veterans. And you're like, if this was a spy.
So wait, this gentleman did or didn't go to prison?
He did. He got a 9-year sentence. So they took a plea deal. And
Okay.
they drop the espionage charges and they just give them like willful retention of classified data, which if you
Okay.
look at common chart, like sentencing for that, it's like a year to 3 years. Usually you get probation. He got 9 years, 9 years, and they give him 3. They cut off 3 for good behavior. And he
Right.
had been in prison too. So he even tested, I'd look at his appeals. He even argued in his appeals how disproportionate his sentence was. And the military had people come in and testify as to what he did was so serious. But all the stuff that they released publicly about why he was a danger for national security, it was all just mundane emails. Like he never had really done anything wrong that they could actually point to. And they could never show the video.
Okay, we don't go too much on the weeds on that because of the limit of time here.
Yeah,
I think the point here I'm trying to make is
Yeah.
the underlying technology that had been used that exists is not known by members of Congress and the president and the oversight committees. Therefore, the underlying programs are unconstitutional and treasonous. I don't care how many bureaucrats and corporate shills and lawyers that are corporate shills say otherwise. If the president and the people who constitutionally must oversee such operations are actively blocked, and that's what we can prove is happening, not only in the Senate and the House, but in the White House over many, many administrations, because I'm the one who has conversations with those sort of folks all the time. And so what at this point, if there's an underlying criminal operation that is unconstitutional and a priori treasonous, everything else that flows from it is also illegal. And anything that is done in the furtherance of that under RICO statutes, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization, which is how we, took on the mafia, all of those operations fall into it. And then the whistleblowers are protected. So even though and it's called, basically this is when you're doing, a stovepipe. So you have a classified TSSCI stovepipe, but then they'll attach to it legitimate. And one of the ways they've kept the very illegal programs a sticky wicket is that you could get burned by exposing a legally overseen known operation by the senior gang of 8 and the president, but attached and buried in it in another stovepipe within a stovepipe are the illegal criminal operations. This is a nuance that no one is looking at, and it imperils that in and of itself is another felony. If you are committing a treasonous and unconstitutional act on something related to UAPs and what have you, and use a legitimate top secret program to further that secrecy, that is compounding it, and it is another felony. It's another criminal act. So that's how that all falls apart. And this gets to then what is eventually going to happen, 2 paths. Key people in this case, assuming they're still living, and you mentioned the woman who saw the plane on fire and things like that, they would have to be subpoenaed, and then they would have to testify under oath. If it's a U.S. citizen, if they are queried by a federal officer, agent, and they lie, that's a felony. And the law enforcement would then have to say, all right, because they've already concluded, I can tell you this, senior law enforcement and certain members of Congress have already concluded that and certain key people in the administration have concluded these operations related to UAPs are in fact part of a massive RICO criminal organization. And at that point, everything can be rolled up in it. Now, obviously, there would be legitimate covert programs, drone programs, or telemetry, satellite monitoring, but to the extent those are being used, and you then have to redact certain things. But say the use of something like these plasmas or plasmoids to create, we have a whistleblower who has said it was an Einstein-Rosen bridge that gets created by that system, where it just looks like it vanishes. And if in fact that plane on fire vanished and quote unquote teleported over to off the coast of Africa, that's totally doable. People don't realize that capability does exist and has existed for some time.
Yeah, it just won a Nobel Prize. I mean, macroscopic quantum tunneling, 2025. I'm on Tim Pool like 6 months ago saying that's what they did to the plane. There's a difference between the conceptual understanding of it, which is a wormhole,
Right.
which is a geometric shape, versus the actual physical mechanism that allows it to occur,
Right.
which is manipulating the 0-point energy. Like the 0-point energy is the distance between here and there, because the 0-point energy is space-time itself. So if in quantum tunneling you reduce the barrier, reducing the barrier is reducing the 0-point energy. And that's why I think that even 𝗷𝗃𝗍, he's the one. I wanted to ask you like how you even got in touch with him, because he's the guy I think is working with the CIA to determine when these weapons are deployed that goes above the president, according to the presidential executive emergency action documents. And so
he's been an operative of this group for decades. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And he knows about this. He actually responded to a couple of my emails, but he's playing coy, of course, with it. But he's the one that has this polarizable vacuum model where he's basically saying that if you want to manipulate the 0-point energy, use electromagnetism. Well, nothing has more condensed electromagnetism than a thermonuclear weapon, specifically an aneutronic one, which does direct energy conversion to electricity. So that's what I think they're using to do this. But the problem I think you're going to have is that
people have to understand what he's talking about is not like we think of an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb blast. You need to make a distinction when people hear what you said. Yeah,
because
people don't understand. You need to define that a little, because people are thinking boom.
Yeah, and this is the thing. This is what people have to wrap their brain around. Nuclear weapons in 1945 are not the same as nuclear weapons of 2014 or 2025. One of the first things they were trying to do is get rid of the heat, get rid of the radiation, and just have it be pure energy conversion. This is aneutronic fusion, meaning no neutrons are being released. So instead, you get pure electricity, pure energy. And I think that's what they're using on that plane. But then this brings a big problem up, because now, like you said, they could be rolling this up into classifications that are perfectly legal from thermonuclear weapon or nuclear weapon secrets.
That's what they do.
Yeah, that's what they're
doing.
We
know that's what they do. We absolutely know that's what they do.
So
and that's how they burn. By the way, that's how they burn whistleblowers or investigators getting too close. I know a couple of key investigators, one a very senior one for Senate intelligence, got too close, but what was wrapped around the illegal program were some things that were legal that he was not to access. And so then, we got you. See, it's a honeypot, it's a sting, but that in of itself, to use a legitimate classified project as a sting for hiding a criminal treasonous operation, that is an even more serious crime. So this is where the whistleblowers and investigators like yourself need to understand this, because, you cannot, and I've said this since the 90s, the foundation of the whole disclosure movement is that we were able to prove by me having meetings with very senior people who, if the programs were being run legally, would know. And they had, absolutely were not read in. And this is Bill Clinton. This is his CI director. This is General Patrick Hughes, who is head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is Admiral Tom Wilson, head of J2, head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee in the 90s, Dan Burton, who was trying to find out about this and was blown off and threatened, and on and on and on. So this is not crap I've drug off the internet by Googling things. This is 30-some years of direct meetings with people that if these programs were legal, they would have been read on to them and known about it. And this is the foundation of people coming forward and being able to avail themselves of whistleblower protection. So one thing I want to say is, anyone who knows about this case, we do have a law enforcement team that can extend protection, surveillance, as well as whistleblower protection, because there are active criminal investigations involving RICO that are ongoing and that this gets rolled up into. And if there are people like that, they don't need to be out there on a limb twisting. They need to come in and be part of that network. And I'm a direct liaison to that task force. So
yeah, if
I
can
think
jump in. I'll just
Yeah.
add there that if anybody does have info about this, I suggest you go to Dr. Greer. His people can get in touch with me if you want to. I'm not very easy to get in touch with directly, and he has the resources to vet and make sure, because I know for a fact there's
We
thousands
do.
of people who know that's wide area motion imagery, and they know that's Gorgon
Yep.
stare. And
Mhm.
and the thing is, like, this is the part about disclosure. It's tough. Like, what I've learned is Congress has no idea. You're right. They have no clue whatsoever. And I'm not even sure they should know, just my personal
Mhm.
opinion, because when we're talking about these thermonuclear weapons secrets, like, they're going to get out. I think the part where I kind of diverge a little with you, and not saying I disagree, because I agree with you on a lot, is that I don't think you can disclose part of it without disclosing all of it. Like, once you realize that we can create these plasmoids that are these stabilized plasma shapes and forms that can create these weapons, they are also an unlimited energy source forever. It's the perfect fusion, essentially.
Mhm.
But so the problem is, now once you want one piece of it, you get all of it to come out. And I think this is where they struggle. And then to what you said
Oh, it
about
is.
now,
No, this is why we've said for years. I mean, if you look at the
yeah,
things in our archive that I wrote to President Clinton after I briefed his CI director, is that certain aspects of there are ways to configure what you're talking about into energy systems that would ameliorate the biosphere problems and end poverty. And there are ways those can be applied that are clearly a weapon system. Those applications have to be completely kept secret and regulated and what have you. But, look, everyone knows we have thermonuclear bombs, so you can't go to Ace Hardware and buy one. You can have a tanker filled with, fuel, gasoline, and run it into a stadium and blow up a couple thousand people. Look, at a certain point, and this gets into a larger question. We're stuck. I did a movie a couple years ago called The Lost Century. You may have seen it.
my favorite
And we're
documentary, by the
basically
way.
stuck. We're stuck in the late 1800s, maybe if you count power plants, nuclear power plants, the mid 1940s, 50s with atomic and fission nuclear power, which is basically a big steam engine, heating water. That's all it is. I mean, if people don't realize a modern nuclear power plant is a big steam engine, like the choo-choo trains of the 1800s going across the West. I mean, people are not very literate about science, to be honest with you. But that means that our civilization is going to have to, at some point, evolve socially and politically to where at least the first tier of these technologies come out. And the other problem with the extreme secrecy on this, the skullduggery and misuse of those technologies, like if this is actually what happened to those innocent people, that's what we're talking about. But I have worse cases. I have a case where 250,000 people were killed by the deployment of a type of directed energy weapon over the fault line off of Indonesia that caused that massive tsunami and earthquake that killed 250,000 people. And that I have people who were on the contract vessel that went down there and detonated that thing. But it's not an explosion. It's a directed energy type of system, like a directional EMP scalar system. They're also being used to down ET craft. I've been at 2 black sites recently where we have whistleblowers who are at those sites where these systems are used to down non-human vehicles, and inadvertently, which ties into the MH370, down private civilian aircraft that happen to get in the way. And they'll just take them, they crash, they incinerate them to powder and get rid of the bodies they call biologicals and the remains of whether it's a Cessna or whatever it is. Now, these sorts of atrocities are ongoing. And the man-made UFOs that are made by Lockheed Northrop and my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon and a few other, Boeing and Skunk Works, by the way, are the same entity on this engineering. A lot of people don't know that they are. What you have is all manner of criminal activity going on. And then the worst is that we are not alone in the cosmos, and we have a bunch of people with these sort of technologies, and they're a hammer, and the whole universe is a nail to hit. And so what's happened is that you have an out of control group, not supervised and known by the people or their representatives. And so at a certain point, if you're going to endorse that, then you're endorsing a totalitarian, covert state that trumps democracy and trumps anything, the interests of the people. But then who's watching the hen house?
Yeah.
Right.
No,
I mean, the foxes are in the hen house. So these guys who are doing this, to be honest with you, are committing all manner of dangerous scenarios and abusing those technologies. So while at the one hand, yes, any technology can be turned into, I mean, I'm a trauma doctor. So, I've seen a knife used. You can put butter on your bread or slit someone's throat. I've seen both. No problemo. Easy. But so the question becomes, who is going to be the guardians of that? Who makes these decisions? And is it relegated to a group of, quite frankly, totalitarian fascists who want to run the world into the ground and control things as masters of the universe, motus, as we call them, without any regard for the human future? Because they got on this path without thinking, how do you get out of it? So they've gone so far down this path. What we're trying to do, quite frankly, and this is why I have a lot of support from people inside these covert programs, is to give an exit path, a pathway out. But it's going to have to be done reasonably. And I 100% agree with you. These technologies that are a short path to weaponization and offensive uses can't be allowed to go out there. On the other hand, the whole subject matter, if it remains out of public view and oversight, these extraordinary abuses, a short list that I've just given you is very short. We're talking kidnapping, embezzlement of trillions of dollars, the downing of civilian aircraft, the trafficking in humans, the trafficking in drugs and weapons, the complete subversion of the law. How far do you let an organization go off the rails before something happens to bring them back? Now, are there reasonable national security secrets that have to be maintained? Yes. But at the same time, you can't let an unchecked power. This is what Eisenhower warned about. Beware the military-industrial complex.
JFK
and he
too.
said it because he had already been burned. I know for a fact he had been burned.
So let me add a few more pieces of details on there, because I know that Rubio knows about the videos, because I saw a private email that had a bunch of military intelligence people on it, and he was on it. And they're talking about ball lightning and cold explosions from Tom Bearden, which is what we're talking about in those videos. And so I think that we're never going to probably get disclosure from the government because, like you said, it's all tangled up together. Even Lockheed's tangled this. The defense contractors are. They've been giving preferential treatment to their buddies and the people that are in the know and all this stuff. What I want to point out is the sigma categorizations from nuclear weapons. Sigma number 1 is hydrodynamics, as in magnetohydrodynamics, which is control of plasma with magnetic fields. And then number 11, sigma 11, is inertial confinement fusion, which is one of the main methods of producing fusion. The NIF is what, National Ignition Foundation. So the problem is this stuff is all tangled together. It's all tangled up together. And if it were to get exposed, lots of people have criminal. I mean, like you said, you listed some of the crimes that are out there. And we're talking, we don't know what happened to those people. That could be kidnapping, that could be murder that happened to those people on that plane. And that's just one example. What I would suggest for you might want to follow up on is Charles Chase of Lockheed Martin. He was the leader of the Revolutionary Technologies Division of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. He responded to me and he worked with Ben Rich. You know all about Ben Rich. That was like they were working together on the F-117 Nighthawk, where they almost certainly incorporated some of these electrogravitic effects into it. He's the one that convinced the CXOs of Lockheed Martin to work on this compact fusion reactor. And it went dark in 2018. But his resume, where he moved on to Unlabs, says that that project was successful and that it's breathing on its own. So and he brags about being the one to convince them to work on that. And if you watch their promotional videos, it talks about unlimited range, no fuel on board for this fusion reactor, and using it as propulsion flying around, which is I think exactly what we're seeing in those videos. A couple last things on the science that I just want to, like, because I respect.
By the way, but just so people, you keep using the word nuclear. 100% of everyone listening is thinking radioactive material and ionizing radiation. Just to be clear, that's not what Ashton's talking about. But
no, aneutronic. Everyone needs to get that into their lexicon. Aneutronic fusion, because I've learned
that nobody knows what that is either. Nobody knows what that is.
Think direct energy conversion. What we imagine like nuclear energy being, that's what aneutronic fusion is. Like we're actually putting the atoms together, and then we're getting out of this pure electricity, not turning it into heat and then boiling some water and then spinning the turbine. That's why aneutronic is so big. So helium fusion and Tri-Alpha Energy, I think, are the only two fusion companies currently working on it. Both got funded by the DOE. They have Mithril Capital, Peter Thiel connected to them. So If you want,
Right.
this is not stock advice, but I'm just saying, take a look at those companies. But I want to help out with a little bit of the science and physics, because I hear you explain the physics, the concepts of what they have. They have, we're talking replicators. We're talking, at least in the future, teleportation being possible. The teleportation is possible because of ER equals EPR, which is Einstein-Rosen wormhole is equivalent to Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is just a tiny version of a wormhole scaled up, and we know quantum entanglement's real.
Yeah, one thing people forget, if you look, I know it's very politically incorrect to read, but if you do read, those of you listening, the original Disclosure book and then the book Unacknowledged that went with that film in 2017, there is a whistleblower who was in the Air Force at a base in Canada in 1953, 72 years ago, where they had an electronic system that could, quote, teleport objects, not particles, from one side of the base to the other. And it's sort of funny because what they were doing back then, everyone smoked, and they were using those big glass ashtrays, and it was disappearing and simultaneously reappearing at another. This is 72 years ago. The other thing I remind people is the week that Ben Rich, who had been president of the Lockheed Skunk Works, died. My friend, who was aerospace Jim, said, look, he called him up, and he was only a few days to live. And Ben Rich said, look, anything you can imagine that you've seen at Star Trek or something like that, we've already done at the Lockheed Skunk Works. It's not at Area 51. It's out in the desert. I've been out there. I'm working with people who've been there and in the underground facilities. But what I think people need to understand is that he said that 30 years ago in 1995. And the technology curve just keeps going up, right? So one thing to remember, and this is where this is actually very dangerous, if you have an unchecked, powerful entity that has access to that kind of technology, that are not necessarily guided by the best interests of the world and the people, this is where we could get in a very big problem, not only with what they are doing, but with what they are doing against non-human civilizations that are less than amused by this technology curve that's now being deployed against them. This is what no one's thinking of. So you have to click this up to a higher level of analysis to realize what the threat matrix is by having a group like this go on unchecked and having all access to technologies without any supervision from the people, the media, the government leaders, and what have you. And this is not to say that as I receive information, if there's anything that is a operating schematic, I redact it, because I know that a lot of this technology can't be set loose on the planet, because you could have a terrorist in Mogadishu deliver a fierce weapon over Washington, D.C. in 2 or 3 seconds, not minutes. I mean, because if you're collapsing space-time that way, this is not something you want out to just every Tom, Dick, and Harry. On the other hand, there's a whole constellation of technologies that could come forward that would be very beneficial to humanity. But I think most importantly, and this is why, I gave up my medical career to invite whistleblowers to come forward that we keep putting out there to build it up. But I don't have any legal authority whatsoever. I don't run the FBI or DOJ or White House or Congress, nor do I want to be honest with you. I've never had an aspiration to be involved with government whatsoever. I just got pulled into it. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to guide and advise them. See, this is where an external organization has to provide that perspective, and it is being listened to by senior folks at the agency and elsewhere. But what I would say, this gentleman who went to prison and then changed his name, that information, get the full information to me. If there are other whistleblowers out there that know of that event where 200 plus souls vanished, then that is something that needs to be looked at. And if there was a U.S. corporate or governmental involvement, that needs to be gotten to the bottom of it. Even if some of the reconnaissance and other ways have to be kept secret, the action itself cannot go unchecked. And so, because if that can happen, then they can do anything to anyone.
Yeah.
And
that's what I would say is that I just want the action to not go unchecked. And I am happy to consult and advise any government officials that want to know my opinion, because I agree. I think that we have to be able to admit what we did. I mean, to that point, because I think that those families, they deserve justice. They deserve to know what happened. But at the same time, we need to protect national security. I'm a red, white, and blue blooded American. I love my country. I want to be safe. Trump talks about us having these weapons. Nobody understands, right? So I understand that, and this is why I push people for aneutronic fusion, because to me, that's the avenue of getting what we need, which is unlimited green energy for the world to change everything. And it's still going to be disruptive, but we can avoid giving people thermonuclear weapons that would blow the whole planet up in an instant, right? We don't want our adversaries to have that. So last thought on this is that people wonder, how do you do this? The 0-point energy. The 0-point energy is a wave. If you squeeze that wave together, it's going to become amplified like this. And the portion that's above 0 is the positive energy. The portion below 0 is the negative energy. The negative energy is what we need for warp drives and wormholes. It's just a conceptual misunderstanding when it comes to PhD physicists not understanding this idea of negative energy. It's simply a matter of squeezing your 0-point energy waves and causing them to amplify, and then isolating that. And this is what 𝗷𝗃𝗍𝗃 and Eric Davis say in all their papers. People need to read the Defense Intelligence reference documents, the 38 papers that 𝗷𝗃𝗍 was bragging to Joe Rogan about. Everything is in there, including there's 2 ways to manipulate space-time. One is you could use these aneutronic fusion bombs, which is going to produce this huge amount of energy, and it's going to bend space-time because of E=mc². You have this huge amount of mass energy. But the other way is super powerful lasers. So attosecond lasers, those just won the Nobel Prize in like 2023. The shorter your burst of energy is in time, the more condensed it is. And then this is something I haven't said to anybody. I was actually kind of uncomfortable about it, but there's another way to amplify those lasers, which is using a relativistic plasma mirror. So the plasma itself can actually act as a mirror so that the laser beams bounce off inside of it. And if it's vibrating, which vibration is the secret to all of this, then you get these non-relativistic effects because it's vibrating so fast. This is like the dynamic Casimir effect, which takes the Casimir effect you know about, and all they do is they vibrate the walls. And by vibrating the walls, it can amplify the effect because of this motion, relative motion, just like with a Doppler effect when you're moving in and out like that. They can do the same thing with plasma itself and make the plasma perfectly reflective as well. So they really can produce these plasma balls that are self-sustaining, that amplify laser effects, and that can then manipulate space-time and use it like riding a wave.
Yeah, and so this is where, stepping up way out there is, our planet and our species cannot continue living like we are on the planet. But if we live in the way we are socially, and I would even say to a point spiritually, always at each other's throat over every stupid, superstitious thing we can think of, or this little piece of land here and there, we can't go forward either. And this is why, the foundational problem is that we're running out of time, is that we're going to have to learn how to live together peacefully with very advanced technologies and not weaponizing everything we get our hands on. That is one of the sort of the original sins, as it were, of the primate chimpanzee roots of Homo sapiens, to organize into war and kill everyone you disagree with or who looks different or sounds different. But that's fine when it's clubs and even machine guns or maybe even a jet. It ain't fine with this level of technology. And so this is on the horns of the dilemma where on a very deep level, when the final analysis, it's a social spiritual development that has to be concomitant with the technological. What's happened right now is our technology is way ahead of our social development, which is why we're still blowing each other up over nonsense and superstitions and beliefs and little strips of land here and there that don't amount to anything. But we have technologies that could obliterate the entire planet in the twinkling of an eye. And I think even worse than that, because we're so narcissistic as a species, we're not alone. And the ones that are out there have been watching this for some time with increasing dismay. Ever since we detonated the first atomic bomb, people forget the modern era of, quote, UFO UAP activity coincided precisely with the detonation at the Trinity site of the first atomic bomb, and it's not by an accident. It was absolutely very much related to this. And it still is, because they knew that once a species like ours sets on a path where we go through that level of what happened in the 20th century of physics and science and technology into applied physics, but then taking that and turn it into a fearsome, a terrible weapon that could destroy all life on Earth, that's when a giant red flag comes up over a planet. And boy, do we have a big one flashing red above us. So I think that's, you kind of have to put this into terms that people can understand, but also that members of Congress or White House people can understand, because this science is unfortunately, one of the funny things I had, you mentioned Tom Bearden, love Tom Bearden. We were very good friends. We were very, very close. Oh, yes. Yeah.
I wish I could have met him. There's a few engineers. Him and Paul Sis was another guy that I saw you interview that I wish I could have met.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. And one time I took Lieutenant Colonel Bearden up to some people in the Senate and Science Committee folks, and we were going to do a briefing. And I told him, now, before you go, you're going to have to learn to speak English. Not IQ
Southern
200 geek talk, physics talk. And we went in there, but he couldn't do it. The guy was so brilliant, but it's like at the end, I could tell no one could follow. Maybe they could follow this but everything he said was like Swahili. And so I had to do a translation for them. But one thing I remind people, when you're talking to folks, whether it's media, the general public, Senate, people, presidents, none of them understand science. And most of their science advisors, that's who we were addressing, don't understand this level of science, because you're not learning that at MIT and Harvard. You're going to learn that in the Skunk Works, or someplace. So we have to learn to discuss it in a way that brings it to earth, and define our terms. But I also think that what you're doing is important. I would say we need to put out a call, and I'm doing that right now, to people who are knowledgeable of what really happened. There are people who know. And I do think that this gentleman who went to prison, I don't care what his current or former name was, absolutely could be interrogated. And he would not be able to not answer the questions on something that's a mass murder criminal case that did involve either U.S. technology companies or U.S. Military or intelligence personnel. I mean, the prerogative for the rule of law would trump whatever secrets he's been told to hide. So
I would hope so. I think he needs a pardon, though. Honestly, I mean, the only way I could see him talk is his plea deal would have something in there. It says that he's going back.
That can be done. This is called a letter of non-prosecution. You can get immunity. And this is the other thing, people listening, the folks I'm talking with are in a position to be able to put that in place. Because when the day is done, we have a whole bunch of high value people in corporate and government workplaces that need exactly that. And that's what needs to happen. And this has been discussed. You've seen some of the draft legislation in Congress, but in reality, this can be done through the Department of Justice and also the executive branch. To anyone who has information of great significance, they can receive a letter of non-prosecution and immunity for everything they've done and have been involved with. But the quid pro quo on that is they have to disclose everything. They can't disclose this and hold back that. It has to be the full disclosure. But that is what we have folks who want to move in that direction. And I would say people connected to this case and other UAP related cases should contact us. You can contact Mr. Forbes, you can contact us, and we'll collaborate on getting this to the right people who want to see the truth come out and have it come out correctly. And by the way, everyone I'm working with in the government end of this, who are the white hats who want this, they understand the sensitivity of the technology release, that it isn't everything. We're not wild-eyed UFO people who go, oh, everything should come out and we're floating in UFOs going from Paris to New York in 2 minutes tomorrow. I mean, there's a technology curve that has to get adapted to society's conditions and the state of the world. And the state of the world right now, it ain't peaceful, you know. So and so, you know, in a dangerous world, we have to figure out how to benefit and advance human civilization without destroying it, right? So that's threading that needle. It takes some wisdom, and there are people who I'm working with who I would say everyone I'm working with understand this issue.
Yeah. I have some final thoughts. One is just that I think somebody wants this to come out. That's the reason why I've been not been told to stop or what have you. I don't know what the factions are. I would love to know what they are. But if Edward Lynn's out there, you know, you just heard it right here. He's got the resources. If you want to get, you know, legally covered before you can talk about it, because that's what it would take, I think, for the public to understand. I've spoken. I haven't mentioned this, but I've spoken to like businessmen that are extremely successful, wealthy. I'm not going to name names. But just like you said, they don't understand the science, just like the politicians don't necessarily understand it. That's why my personal action has been to teach people the science and explain it in a way that normal people understand. Not in the way that the physicists talk about it, where they're always name dropping things and you can't follow what they're saying, but in a way that normal people can get it. And the last thought is, what I've learned from this technology related to your you know, search for extraterrestrial life, wherever that may be. They definitely know. I mean, we're talking with the laser capability, they can get below the diffraction limit. So they can have telescopes that are just beyond people's wildest imaginations. If there's something out there, they know about it. My personal belief is that the moment we change LIGO to start looking for artificial gravitational waves instead of just natural ones where neutron stars are colliding, I think the whole universe is going to light up, because aliens are flying around. They're not flying around on rocks like 3i, Atlas, whatever. They're flying around on warp drives and wormholes. They don't need to fly on a space rock, slow space rock that's moving like 0.0% of the speed of light or whatever. It's like, come on.
Oh, it's ludicrous. Yeah. I mean, so many of these things, you know that that's somebody with academic credentials gaslighting gullible people in the Congress and the public.
We won't name names, but yeah.
Oh, I will. 𝗬𝗏. I know exactly.
𝗬𝗏. He wants $100 million for his Galileo project. I get it. I understand.
No, now he's asking for $1 billion. Now he's asking for $1 billion. You know, the Rat Pack with Bigelow Aerospace got maybe I don't know, 100 billion, a million, I don't know, but now they want $1 billion to keep the whole charade going, right?
Let's put $1 billion into aneutronic fusion research, and then we can all have infinite energy forever. And then we don't have to worry about any of this stuff.
Exactly. Well, good. It was a pleasure finally meeting you, at least virtually. I hope I'm telling you. Where do you live, by the way?
I live in Minnesota, so yeah.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I have a place in DC and a place out here in the Blue Ridge Mountains near Thomas Jefferson's house. So if you ever get out back east,
we should meet up sometime. I'll follow along and start to meet up. And and if you can spread the word and try to get awareness in Congress or in government in general, either about the 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝗏 case, which I think the thread will unravel everything, or just in general about really the capabilities of thermonuclear weapons and their connection to UFOs, I think is vital. I mean, you laid it out earlier. So thank you very much, Dr. Greer. Thank you, Raven, for having me on.
Thank you. Yeah. Have a good afternoon. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.